This is the morning of the 4th of November. This will be part 2 of reportedly Sean Diddy sentenced to life. Let's have a listen. It'll play for around 17 minutes.
The judge leaned back, visibly disturbed. "These are serious allegations," he said, his tone heavy, "and the court cannot ignore this kind of evidence." A chill ran through the courtroom. The once untouchable mogul sat small, shrunken, almost ghost-like. The man who had built an empire on music, power, and charm was now cornered by the one thing he couldn't manipulate: the truth. And outside the courthouse, the world waited, breath held, for what would happen next. Every major network, every social media feed, every conversation was focused on one question. Would this be the moment that finally ended Diddy's empire? As the afternoon sun faded through the tall courtroom windows, the energy in the SDNY chamber shifted. The trial wasn't just unfolding, it was exploding. The prosecution had just announced a surprise witness. The murmurs grew instantly. Even Cassie looked slightly caught off guard. Then through the back doors, a woman walked in, head bowed, escorted by federal agents. She was a former employee, one who had worked for Diddy's private security team. Her name wasn't released publicly, but the silence that followed her oath was absolute. "I saw things," she said quietly, "things no one was ever supposed to see." The defense immediately objected, claiming surprise testimony, but the judge didn't flinch. "We're allowing it," he ruled. "Proceed." The witness continued, voice shaking but clear. "I was part of the team that secured those parties. Our job was simple: make sure no cameras got out. But inside those rooms," she paused, her eyes filling with tears, "it wasn't music and fun. It was control, fear. I watched girls being forced to stay quiet while Diddy's people confiscated their phones. The jurors exchanged uneasy glances. Cassie's legal team stood silently, letting her words hang in the air like smoke. Every new sentence felt heavier than the last, like the truth was finally too big to bury. When the witness mentioned the truth tape, you could feel the tension spike. "There was always talk about that tape," she said. "Everyone on the team knew it existed. Diddy kept it locked, said it was his insurance policy. But I think Cassie found it before anyone else could destroy it." Diddy's hands clenched tight, knuckles whitening. His lawyer whispered again, but Diddy shook his head, slowly, almost defeated. It was the first visible crack in his defiance. Cassie looked down at her lap, tears brimming but no longer hidden. Every word from that witness wasn't just evidence, it was validation. Years of silence were being ripped apart in front of the entire world. Judge Subramanian rubbed his temple, clearly disturbed. "The court will take this under consideration," he said, his tone calm but heavy. "If what we are seeing and hearing continues to align with the evidence presented, we may be looking at a complete reassessment of the prior sentence." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. A reassessment. Those words hit Diddy like thunder, because everyone knew what that meant. Outside the courthouse, media vans lined every block. News anchors spoke with urgency. It's Friday, October 10th, 2025, and Sean Diddy Combs' fate might be changing forever. New testimony, new footage, and shocking revelations, all unfolding right now inside SDNY. For the first time in years, Diddy wasn't in control of his story. And as the clock ticked toward the end of the day, it became clear that this wasn't just another hearing. This was Judgment Day for a man who once thought he could rewrite reality itself. The courtroom air had turned heavy, thicker with every passing second. Diddy leaned forward, his jaw tight, eyes glassy, while Cassie sat motionless, staring at the floor like she had finally exhaled years of pain. The judge called for the next exhibit, and the prosecution projected one last clip from Cassie's truth tape. The video wasn't long, maybe 30 seconds, but it didn't need to be. It showed Diddy walking through the same hotel hallway Cassie had described in her statement. The timestamp matched the night in question. His security detail followed close behind. There was laughter. Low, drunken, but unmistakably his. And then, the sound of a door closing. That was it. No music, no words. But in that silence, the weight of it all was deafening. The jurors' faces told the story. They'd seen enough. Diddy's lawyer tried to stand again, objecting to misinterpretation, but the judge raised a hand. Enough, Mr. Agnifilo. The evidence speaks for itself. And then came the moment that twisted the entire room. Cassie rose slowly, her attorney's hand steadying her. Your Honor, she said softly, before we close, I want to speak. Not for revenge, but for closure. The judge nodded. Proceed. She turned toward Diddy. Her voice didn't tremble. You told me I'd never have a voice. You told me no one would ever listen. But today, the world listened. She paused, scanning his face, once confident, now broken. You built your empire on silence and fear. I built my courage from the ruins of it. The courtroom stayed frozen. Even reporters didn't move. Diddy dropped his head into his hands. For the first time, he looked small, like the walls around him had finally closed in. The same man who used to walk red carpets, surrounded by flashing lights, now sat under the cold, fluorescent glow of justice. Outside, the noise was explosive. News alerts pinged on every phone. Breaking, final testimony from Cassie leaves, Diddy speechless, sentencing to follow. Police tightened the barricades as chants from protesters echoed through the Manhattan streets. Some shouted for justice. Others defended him blindly. But inside that courtroom, it was over. Everyone could feel it. The story that began years ago in luxury and lies was ending in silence and consequence. The judge stood, voice stern but measured. This court will reconvene shortly for final sentencing, he announced. All parties are instructed to remain available. The gavel hit once, sharp, echoing through the marble hall, and everyone knew, when it came down again next time, it wouldn't just mark the end of a trial, it would mark the end of Diddy. When the court resumed after a brief recess, the atmosphere felt entirely different. Gone was the tension of uncertainty. It had been replaced by the electric stillness that comes right before a storm. Cameras weren't allowed inside SDNY, but the images being painted through words were enough to shake the world. The media outside had already branded it. The day of reckoning. Diddy sat back down at the defense table, his posture stiff, his expression unreadable. His once pristine suit was creased from hours of sitting. Cassie's team returned too, silent but strong, their eyes locked on the judge's bench. Even the jurors seemed exhausted, emotionally drained but braced for whatever was coming next. The prosecution began with final remarks. Your Honor, this is not about fame nor fortune, the attorney said, pacing slowly before the court. This is about the abuse of power. For years, Sean Combs believed he was untouchable, that his influence could silence anyone, including victims who simply wanted peace. But power does not erase pain. Fame does not replace accountability. And no one, no matter how big their name, should be bigger than the law. Murmurs rippled across the courtroom. The attorney's tone grew sharper. Cassie Ventura and the brave witnesses who stepped forward did so knowing the risks. They were threatened, discredited, even followed. Yet here they are, and their courage has revealed what the world refused to see. Diddy's lawyer rose immediately, voice trembling. Your Honor, my client has already faced public humiliation, professional destruction, and media persecution. We ask that the court take into account his years of charitable work, his mental state, and his willingness to cooperate since the reopening of this case. The judge listened quietly, his hands folded, eyes fixed on the defense table. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The silence felt eternal. Then Judge Subramanian leaned forward. Mr. Combs, this court has reviewed every piece of evidence, every statement, and every testimony. You have had your chance to speak, and the evidence, especially the recent recordings and witness statements, paints a picture that cannot be ignored. His tone hardened. The time for excuses has long passed. Cassie's lawyer clasped her client's hand, knowing what was about to come next. Cassie didn't blink. She had been preparing for this moment for years. The moment when her truth would finally outweigh his power. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance as news anchors broke the update in real time. Crowds had swelled to hundreds, maybe thousands. People held signs that read, "Justice for Cassie and no one above the law." Inside, the judge adjusted his glasses and prepared to speak the final words that would echo around the world. And at that exact moment, Diddy lifted his head. His lips trembled, and under his breath he muttered, "This can't be happening." But it was happening, and there was no stopping what came next. Friday, October 10th, 2025, 4:47 p.m. The courtroom of the Southern District of New York had gone silent. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, the shuffle of papers, the tremor in people's breathing. The judge had returned to his bench, robe flowing, eyes grave. Everyone knew what was about to happen, but no one could predict how heavy it would feel when the words finally fell. "Mr. Combs," Judge Aaron Subramanian began, voice low but slicing through the silence. "This court has weighed every testimony, every image, every second of that footage, and every moment of your history." Diddy stared straight ahead, expression blank, but inside you could almost see the panic building behind his eyes. The judge continued. "On Friday, October 3rd, you were sentenced to 50 months in prison, but after the court agreed to reopen this matter following the new testimony of Ms. Ventura and the emergence of the truth tape, we have reassessed the gravity of your actions." You could feel the audience tense. Even the air seemed to pause. Cassie's team leaned forward. Reporters' pens hovered above notepads. The judge's tone sharpened. "The evidence presented leaves no doubt. These were not isolated incidents. They were patterns, deliberate, cruel, and consistent. The court cannot and will not allow power, money, or influence to overshadow justice." Diddy's lawyer whispered something quickly, desperate, but the judge raised his hand. "Sit down, Mr. Agnifilo. The time for argument is over." And then it came. The words that would echo across every news outlet, every social feed, every street corner in America. "For the crimes of coercion, assault, and trafficking, and for your sustained abuse of power, the court hereby sentences you, Sean Combs, to life imprisonment." A gasp broke from the audience. Sharp, collective, human. Cassie's hands flew to her face as tears streamed silently. Her attorney whispered, "It's over. It's finally over." Diddy's face crumpled. His composure shattered completely. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands gripping his head. The man who once commanded stages, who was once untouchable, now looked like a shadow of himself. The judge's voice carried one last statement, firm, almost symbolic. "Let this sentence serve as a reminder. Fame does not protect you from justice. This courtroom belongs not to the powerful, but to the truth." The gavel came down, once, twice, and that was it. Outside, chaos erupted. Reporters shouting, sirens blaring, protesters cheering, others crying. Headlines exploded within minutes. Breaking: Diddy sentenced to life in prison after Cassie's testimony shocks court. Empire fallen. Diddy's life sentence marks end of an era. Inside, Cassie stood, looked toward Diddy one last time and whispered, "You can't silence the truth forever." Diddy didn't answer. He just stared down, lost, as marshals moved in, handcuffs clinking, marking the sound of the end of his freedom. This was it. The moment the empire he built came crashing down. Not with music, not with applause, but with judgment. As the gavel's final echo faded through the marble courtroom, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The reporters' pens fell silent, the whispers died, and all that remained was the heavy rhythm of footsteps. U.S. Marshals closing in on Sean Diddy Combs. His once perfectly tailored suit now looked like a prison uniform waiting to happen. His hands trembled slightly as they clasped the cold steel cuffs around his wrists. Cassie didn't move. She just watched, not with vengeance, not with satisfaction, but with exhaustion. It was the kind of silence that comes only after years of screaming and finally being heard. Judge Aaron Subramanian stood for a brief moment before leaving the bench, his voice lingering in the air. Justice has been served. Outside SDNY, Manhattan streets were chaos. Cameras flashed, news vans crowded the steps, and people shouted over one another to capture the headline of the decade. "Life sentence for Diddy!" screamed one reporter. Another whispered to the camera, "The fall of an icon is complete." Inside the courtroom, Diddy turned to glance behind him one last time. His eyes met Cassie's, the same woman he once controlled, manipulated, and silenced. For a split second, the noise outside faded. The world stopped. It was just them. Two people on opposite sides of truth. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. But her silence said everything. Diddy's lawyer whispered frantically, "We'll appeal, Sean. We'll fight this." But his words were hollow, fading against the weight of the verdict. There was nothing left to fight. Not the judge, not the jury, not the truth. As Diddy was escorted out, the courtroom doors opened and the cold October air rushed in. Flashbulbs exploded. Protesters cheered. Others shouted in disbelief. Some even wept. Sentence increased to life. Banners rolled across every TV screen. Social media drowned in hashtags. Hashtag Cassie wins. Hashtag Diddy life sentence. Hashtag justice in SDNY. Back inside, Cassie stepped forward, escorted by her attorney. Reporters crowded her immediately. Microphones thrust forward. Voices overlapping. "Cassie, do you have anything to say? Do you feel vindicated? What message do you want to send to survivors watching this right now?" She paused, steadying herself. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the noise. This was never about revenge. This was about truth. The truth doesn't die, even when people try to bury it. And with that, she turned away from the cameras and walked down the courthouse steps, disappearing into the flashing storm of lights. Meanwhile, in the distance, a black van pulled away slowly. Diddy inside, head down, staring blankly through the reinforced glass. The city that once played his music now echoed with a different sound. The sound of accountability.
I wonder what Trump's going to do now. Because it's quite possible that Trump's going to pardon him. You notice we don't hear anything at all about Jeffrey Epstein's partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell. I think she's been released from prison. I'll attach the link. Pass it along, and thanks for listening.